Alright you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. So check it out you guys, I got another banger for you. I know some of you probably saying, man, it's about damn time. I know. It's been a minute since I've been able to post any content on my channel. For those of you that got the update on my community page, I've been sick and down for the count for about a good 10 days. You know, it's crazy too because it's been a long time since I've been sick or since I caught a flu bug, but this one right here, it got me. And this is one that you guys don't want no part of. So just be warned, there's a good one that's going around right now. But anyways, at least I was productive on some level because a few of you tapped in and shared some stories with me, and there's some bangers. So I've literally got stories that are backed up waiting to be told to you guys. I'll preview the thumbnails at the end of this story, but without further ado, let me get straight into this one. So there's so many different twists and turns to this story, and there's so many different layers to it that I don't know where to begin or what angle I should start from. I mean, the focal point of this story is obviously MacArthur Park and what's going on in that neighborhood. But this story is so convoluted with so many different twists that I want to make sure that I give it all to you guys and that I don't miss nothing. So I guess I'll start out by saying this. For those of you who've been following me for a while and who might remember, I ran a story last year sometime around June that was titled Delayed Implications: The Blaze on Burlington Boulevard. And it was basically the backstory on how that fire was started back in 1993, why and who was involved. And at the time that I ran that story, I had a lot of good information from several different inside sources. But if I was to run that story back today, I could definitely go into a lot more detail and talk about a lot of things that I wasn't aware of at that time. You know, in that first story, I talked a lot about the Columbia Little Cycle street gang, as they basically run the entire west side of 18th Street. And MacArthur Park is right there in the heart of their stomping grounds. MS-13 also claims that territory, but that whole area right there is predominantly ran by 18th Street. In that other story, I also talked about Juan Romero, Termite from 18th Street, Ramiro Valerio, Greedy from 18th Street, Joseph Monge, Clever from 18th Street, and Joanna Lopez, who were all believed to be complicit in starting that fire. At least that's the story that the media put out there. You know, according to several of my sources who were both incarcerated, Greedy and Clever got straight railroaded, but that's a story for another day. Later, they would all eventually get convicted and sentenced to long prison sentences and stay prison. And then finally, the other part of the story talked about how two of 18th Street's most prestigious leaders, who were also both members of the Mexican Mafia, Francisco Martinez Puppet and Ruben Castro Night Owl, led one of the biggest street gangs in the country and transformed it into a money-making machine that was comparable to a modern-day Ponzi scheme. And on a side note, my sources wanted me to emphasize this point, that even though Puppet, Night Owl, and Anthony Saragosa, Coco, would all three later become instrumental in building 18th Street up into what it has become today, they said Termite was the one who laid a lot of the foundation during their times, and that without him, 18th Street wouldn't have prospered the way that it did. You know, I don't want this to turn into a history lesson, but if you're really going to talk about some of the pioneers and catalysts of 18th Street, it technically originated on the corner of 18th Street and Arapahoe Street in the Rampart district of West Los Angeles. And during that first wave of 18th Street gang members, you had individuals like Robert Spooky Gonzalez, Sleepy, Casper, and Robert Lee Glover, among others. You know, the Glover brothers were actually instrumental in creating 18th Street all the way back when they tried to merge with Glanthone 14. But because the Glover brothers were of German and Native American descent, Glanthone 14 declined the offer. There's a gem for some of you that didn't know that. I study this stuff. That's why it takes me so long to do these stories, you know, and their history is actually pretty crazy because due to the Glover brothers feeling the sting of being discriminated against based on their ethnicity, they ended up spawning one of their own street gangs called Calle 18 or 18th Street. And with no street gang affirmative action to lean on, they vowed not to do the same and allowed other races to join. And as a direct consequence, 18th Street became to be the largest Mexican street gang in LA County. Imagine the irony in that. But back to Termite and his contribution. You know, I know there's probably going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with this, especially based on the fact that Termite would end up turning state's evidence in the Westlake fire case. And that's okay, this ain't my fight. But that doesn't change the facts. And as far as a lot of 18th Street gang members are concerned, he still deserves that credit. You know, I'm not going to rehash the whole story and go back into all the things that I already talked about, but I am going to kind of jump around and tell you guys what's going on within 18th Street's leadership, what's happening in MacArthur Park right now today, and how George Gonzalez, Güero Caballo from Eastside 18th Street has apparently caused so much internal strife that has led to division and major pushback. And before I go into the details of this story, let me just make it very clear that I don't have any personal ill will or negative feelings against Güero Caballo. I don't know him, never ran into him at either Pelican Bay or Corcoran, and that everything that I'm about to talk about in this story is coming from his own neighborhood. And just to clarify another point on that, this isn't coming from someone who people would consider to be a disgruntled ex-employee. This is coming from two people who still claim to be active, but who obviously can't say these things themselves. In their own words, they have no desire to take Wedo Caballo down, nor are they pushing an agenda against him. But again, as they put it themselves, Wedo Caballo, through his own choices, has caused discord and so much division within 18th Street that they at least want the masses to know exactly what's going on. So I guess I'll start with MacArthur Park, since it seems to be the nucleus that's at the center of this entire dilemma. So for those of you who aren't familiar with MacArthur Park, it's located in central Los Angeles, bordered by the neighborhoods of Westlake and Pico Union. It was once a scenic park that was revered for its historic roots in that part of Los Angeles. However, after suffering the effects of two unforgiving epidemics that touched most of the bigger and smaller metropolitan cities across the country, homelessness and fentanyl, it's now known for its grime and squalor conditions. In fact, some people have now even referred to MacArthur Park and some of the surrounding areas as Skid Row, or better yet, as either fentanyl Disneyland or Zombieland. They call it Zombieland because of what fentanyl has done to people out there. I'm sure we've all seen it on some level. If it wasn't in person, then maybe on TV, but it's destroying people. You can go down to one of these spots at any given time of the day, and you're likely to see 30 or 40 of these guys congregating around piles of trash, doing what's been known as either the zombie lean or the fentanyl fold, where they'll be standing straight up, but they'll be bent over at the waist, and the knuckles of their hands will be touching the ground. Now, it's scary to see what fentanyl and some of these other synthetic drugs are doing to people out there. People should be terrified. You know, as I get more into this story, I'll get deeper into the internal politics that's being propagated by some of 18th Street's leadership, such as Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco. 18th Street gang leaders who not only strongly oppose the use of fentanyl, but who are also against fentanyl being sold anywhere in 18th Street territory, including MacArthur Park. And again, the reason for this is because they didn't want their neighborhood turning into another Skid Row, or like I said, fentanyl Disneyland, exactly like it would later become. And here's the crazy thing about it, even though these guys were buried deep in federal prison and were nowhere near the streets, they still had good foresight and seen these things coming long before it even happened. So anyways, I'm going to take you guys all the way back to around 2015, right around the time when the COs that worked at Pelican Bay and Corcoran started telling everyone that they were getting ready to get kicked out, that everyone was getting ready to go back out to the main lines. You know, just imagine how some of these dudes were feeling that had been slammed down in the chute for 15, 20, 30 years or longer. This was the next best thing to going home. So by this time, everybody had already heard about it because it had officially been circulated right after the federal rulings came down in the Ashker-Troxel class action lawsuit. But this made it surreal for a lot of these guys. It made it official. It was finally happening. You know, I'm sure this part of it was the same for everyone. The MA, the NF, the AB, and the BGF. Everyone started delegating their crews ahead of time, telling some of the solid individuals who had stayed the course back there and who had proven their loyalty that they were going to be working with them, that they were going to be on the team, etc., etc. Everyone basically started appointing their crews before they even got there, especially in the short corridor. You know, keep in mind, there was a good handful of Mexican Mafia members that were in line to get kicked out with everyone else. So as I'm sure you guys can imagine, there was kites being sent everywhere and there was a lot of communication going on. I'm sure the energy was crazy. Now, with respects to Wedo Caballo, one of my sources basically broke down a little bit of his history and some of the internal conflict that's always kind of lingered with regards to him and Westside 18th Street. He said that all throughout the 80s, Wedo Caballo never really had a strong crew of go-getters who were ever successful at generating money, and that he really didn't have any hitters on his team. The big players were always Puppet and Night Owl. Even Vivesi Sagado, Vessi, who was of Samoan descent, was part of that circle to an extent. You know, and at that time, Coco hadn't been made yet, but later, Puppet and Night Owl would embrace him, and he would also become to be a factor in the West Side as well. But as far as Wedo Caballo, they really didn't keep him in the loop or include him in any of the big business ventures that they had established. One of my sources said occasionally they throw him some crumbs, like there's a bag outside your door kind of thing, but they left him out of what they were doing on the West Side, especially when it came to the Colombian Little Cycles, and Caballo didn't like that. And apparently he was always bumping heads with Puppet and Night Owl because he felt like he was being left out. Back in the late 90s, prior to them getting hit with the federal racketeering RICO indictment, the Columbia Little Cycles were collecting about $85,000 a week in just protection money alone. And this was just from street level narcotics dealers in the neighborhood northeast of the park. Puppet was pulling in about $25,000 a month, and this was coming in for years. The numbers are crazy. But Puppet and Night Owl had that whole area sewed up, and Güero Caballo was envious of what they were able to do out there. Even Puppet's wife, Janie Garcia, was arrested in that investigation, and when the feds raided her house in Monterey Park, they seized $450,000 in cash and several $1,000s worth of expensive jewelry. But apparently nothing was coming to fruition on the east side. Caballo couldn't get nothing going. So Güero Caballo was always complaining that the west side was making all this money while nothing was really happening on the east side. An observation that really didn't draw any sympathy. My source said that for whatever reason, Güero Caballo felt like he was entitled to some of that money, just based on the fact that they were all from 18th Street. But that's not how it worked. They had the west side, he had the east side. And if the east side wasn't generating no money, then they looked at it like it was either because of his incompetence or the incompetence of the people that were working for him. An example they gave when it came to his inability to make money is when his TV broke in the shoe. It cost around $200 to buy a new TV, but he couldn't come up with this money himself. Eventually he was able to get one, but it took him a long time, and he blamed the west side for not helping him. In fact, according to both of my sources, he held a grudge against anyone from the west side, and he treated them different just based on this alone. But Caballo never really liked anyone from west side 18th Street, because when the money was coming in and they were doing their thing, he was never included in that circle and was always looked at as just another hungry mouth to feed, or as the oddball out that was known to hold a lot of grudges. And here's a few more gems or tidbits about Vesey since I mentioned him earlier. In 1992, Vesey was actually hit in the LA County Jail by Mo Ruiz from White Fence on the orders of Rene Enriquez, boxer from Artesia, and Daniel Grajeda, Cuate from La Rana. Then in early 1994, Vesey's brother, Solo Salgado, and his pregnant wife were gunned down in a vehicle by several individuals who were believed to be fellow 18th Street gang members. And the hit was later deemed to be a Mexican Mafia hit. Now, I doubt the Mexican Mafia agreed to take out his wife knowing she was pregnant, but they were casualties nonetheless. So Vesey apparently was back in good standings briefly after he was hit in 1992, because he was supposed to assist Ruben Hernandez, Thupi from Ontario, and Rene Enriquez, boxer from Artesia, in hitting Raymond Alvarez, Bevito, in the LA County Jail. But then later, Vesey ended up falling out of favor again for good. So fast forward to 1999, Puppet, Coco, and Night Owl all end up getting caught up in a federal RICO indictment, and they all get shipped off to the feds. Meanwhile, Güero Caballo sees this as his opportunity to step up and take over, and that's what he tries to do. He goes on a full-scale recruiting blitz and tries recruiting anybody and everybody that he can, even guys from the west side that he knew didn't like him, and other guys who weren't even from the neighborhood. So long story short, he got no traction. Nobody wanted to work for him, and he had a reputation of being someone who was difficult to work under. So a lot of people avoided him. So now let's jump back to 2015. In 2015, Ramon Tannery, Thumper, and Francisco Escalante, Sleeper, from 18th Street, both paroled from the feds and hit the streets. And as soon as they get out, they're both made. This was all part of a bigger plan by Puppet, Adolf Reynoso, Champ, and the commission. So they knew once they got out and made parole that they were going to be brought in. You know, for all you sticklers that want to know when, where, what day, what time, etc., I'm not exactly sure when it was in 2015, but all the Mexican Mafia members from 18th Street that were working with the West Side were summoned to a mandatory meeting south of the border. Thumper was there, Bo Sleeper and Martin Madrigal, Big Evil was there, Daryl Castrojón, Dashing D, Robert Ruiz, Peanut Butter was there along with the crew of other highly placed 18th Street gang members who were all working with the West Side. So they discussed all the internal workings of the business ventures that they were going to pursue. The startup of their casitas, the extortion rackets that they had established with the legal dispensaries, and all the plans that they had formulated for MacArthur Park at this meeting. This also included the kickback taxes, the reglas, their interaction with the east side, the north side, the south side, and any other potential interference that they might have encountered with other Mexican Mafia members that weren't a part of their inner circle. Keep in mind that by this time, they had already started kicking everyone back out to the main line, so the infighting had already started. You know, I guess at that time, this type of outside interference was real common because of how everybody was still scrambling to organize their crews and go after the movers and shakers who had experience. People were stepping on each other's toes, there was a lot of backbiting going on, and then you had others who were trying to play the rank card. However, Peanut Butter was adamant about curtailing any interference, and he made it clear that he wasn't going to tolerate it from anybody. In fact, according to one of my sources, Caballo's name was specifically brought up because he already had priors for creating discord and interference in the past. And according to one of my sources, apparently these were Peanut Butter's words verbatim. If that old motherfucker doesn't like anything that's going on, you tell him to get at me and I'll take care of it. Then supposedly those who were delegated leadership positions were given a direct number and were told to call it if anyone gave him any kind of static or pushback. Peanut Butter said, if anyone has anything to say about what's going on here, you call this number immediately. And then he made it clear that this was 18th Street business and that they weren't going to allow anyone to interfere with their progress. So sometime around the end of 2015 or the beginning of 2016, both of my sources said that everything was running smooth for the most part. They were making money and they started breaking new ground in 18th Street territory. But then Wedo Caballo found a phone and he started calling everyone and their mother. And this is when the problem started. Despite the fact that these guys on the west side were already anticipating this, they knew that sooner or later Wedo Caballo was going to call. And even though they had safeguards in place, it still created a lot of conflict. And they didn't necessarily shut him down because he was still a big homie and they respected him. But they advised him accordingly that they were under strict orders from Puppet and Night Owl and that he might want to follow protocol and reach out to them. And of course, Wedo Caballo didn't like this and started cussing these guys out. You MFers ain't gonna assist me. I don't gotta get at anyone. Who do you think you are? You can't just jump around and start working for anyone. You're just run-of-the-mill sureños who can be replaced, yada yada yada. So these guys, they don't take the bait. They maintain their composure and they respectfully advise Wedo Caballo that they're already working under Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco. So later at one point, Thumper's made aware of this conversation and he's basically told what Wedo Caballo was up to. So Thumper says, you know what, tell that old motherfucker to call down there. And that's exactly what Wedo Caballo does. He calls Sleeper and Thumper on a conference call and the first thing he says is, who the F are you guys? I don't know you. I've never heard about you. Who you guys working for? Etc, etc. Keep in mind, Thumper and Sleeper had been in the feds for the last 17 years. That's where they did all their time. But they already knew what Caballo was up to and they were already a step ahead of the game. When Caballo called, they had Peanut Butter right there. And this is what Peanut Butter told Caballo verbatim. Hey, effing old man, you need to sit the F down and chill. These guys are brothers. You either like it or you don't. That's on you. I was over there with Puppet and Champ, and if you got a problem with it, then that's on you. But if you want to be a part of the team, then you need to play ball. This is the last time I want to hear about this shit. My sources said that Wedo Caballo had always stayed on his high horse and that he was always real confrontational with everyone else. But when it came to Peanut Butter, he didn't talk back and he stayed quiet. And it's probably smart that he didn't because Peanut Butter was a senior, long-time respected member that had been around for a long time. He was a dinosaur. So from that point on, Caballo supposedly backed off. Puppet then gave him the south side and he told him, you can have the east side and you can have the south side along with King Little G and that whole shit show. But just don't touch the west side or the Columbia Little Psychos. You're not welcome over there. So the other thing that Puppet did was he gave a handwritten letter to that attorney, Gabriel Zendejas, the one that got caught up and indicted in Operation Dirty Thurs. And he instructed him to take that letter and let Wedo Caballo read it himself with his own eyes. And from that point on, Puppet considered it to be a dead issue. The letter basically repeated everything Peanut Butter had already told Caballo about Thumper and Sleeper being made and that he could either be a team player or he was going to find himself out in the cold. And according to my sources, Caballo decided to get in where he fit in. He took the east side and the south side and backed away from everything that was happening on the west side. This is when he started taxing King Little G, something that I mentioned in that story about Swifty Blue. And according to my sources, Caballo decided to get in where he fit in. He took the east side and the south side and backed away from everything that was happening on the west side. This is when he started taxing King Little G, something that I mentioned to you guys in that story about Swifty Blue. So for a short period of time, everything was running smooth. The internal issues slowly subsided, and then, unexpectedly, out of left field, Sleeper OD'd in TJ. And like a lot of other Mexican Mafia members, Sleeper had a deep love affair when it came to that black. Apparently, he started chasing the dragon real hard, and eventually, it caught up with him. It didn't help that he had access to that 9 right there in TJ either. He was getting the raw stuff straight from the cooks, so it was just a matter of time before it was bound to happen. The other thing that didn't help is that the Mexican Mafia has an open door policy when it comes to indulging in carga and other hardcore D. They actually allow it. So Sleeper was made by Jose Marquez, Bat from San Diego. And because all his directives and all his business affairs was coming from somewhere else, Sleeper was of no concern to Caballo. He basically didn't care about Sleeper. But 2 months after Sleeper passes, Thumper also ends up meeting his demise in TJ. A lot of people don't know the real backstory on this, but this is what happened. According to my sources, Thumper was doing it out there. He was doing big things. He was doing everything he was supposed to and some. Apparently, he figured out the perfect formula to make a lot of money. He was doing his thing. He literally had people dropping off new cars, bricks of money, and all kinds of other expensive things to him. And he invested some of his own personal money in several of those small mini-mart gas stations in TJ. They're called OXXOs, similar to AMPMs out here in California. So anyways, the story that was put out there about his passing was that he was taken out in his car after some guy walked up to his girl's window or the passenger side of the car and knocked on her window. You know, at the time, Thumper apparently didn't think much of it. He's like, who's this dude? And when his girl rolled down the window, this guy leaned in and shot Thumper 5 times. The cold part about it is that they took Thumper out in front of his girl, but they let her live. At any rate, here's the backstory on it. According to some of his own homeboys, Thumper had some of the best looking women in TJ. His boys would come over to his house and they would salivate over some of the women that he was always dating. And that's what Thumper did with his free time. He loved women. You can't hate him for that. But he also loved Viagra. He always had a pocket full of blue magic, which kind of goes hand in hand when you're dating that many women. You know, after performing so many times and the well dries up, there comes a point where you need something to help give you a boost, especially if you want to maintain that reputation for being a love machine. You know, my source said he always kept a supply of those little blue pills on him, but Thumper didn't trust the quality of Viagra in TJ, so there would be times when they would travel back to California with him just so he could replenish his supply of blue magic. Thumper was serious about his shit. He wanted to be called a sex machine. So Thumper apparently ran into trouble when he was accused of sleeping with a female that was the niece of a cartel member in TJ. And apparently when this guy found out about it, he took it as a form of disrespect, because he knew that Thumper was aware of the fact that this female was related to this guy, and the rest is history. You guys know how it is. Over there in TJ, paying someone to take someone out is as easy as walking into a liquor store and buying a pack of cigarettes. There's people that are dirt ass poor over there and who'd be more than willing to take someone out for chump change. So unfortunately, his penchant for beautiful women would also end up becoming to be his undoing, and the reason why he would end up being taken out. And it's too bad, because from everything I was able to gather about Thumper, he was a good dude who was liked by everyone, and he was respected by all the people who worked with him. So his passing came as a huge disappointment, but as soon as it happened, everybody started speculating that it might have been a hit that was perpetrated by Puppet. Everybody assumed that it was an inside job. However, almost immediately, Puppet started sending out smoke signals telling everyone, nope, it didn't come from over here. In fact, it was Nelson Flores, Moolah from MS-13, that found out the details of what happened and who was responsible for it. And if anyone had the contacts to know, it was definitely Moolah. He had all of TJ working under Peanut Butter, and he was on the team. And the first thing he did was reach out to their inner circle and let these guys know that it didn't come from Puppet. That he knew all the intricate details, he knew who it was, and that it would also be taken care of. And Moolah liked Thumper. He considered him to be not only a close and trusted business associate, but he also considered him to be a friend as well. So Moolah assured them that it would be taken care of, and apparently someone ended up taking the spice out in similar fashion. Over there, all you gotta do is pay a few cops off and it's a done deal. But the Mexican Mafia wanted to know who it was, and they wanted to make sure that this guy was dealt with, regardless of who it was or who he was affiliated with. This was a made man, but before it had a chance to escalate and become a bigger issue, Moolah swore up and down that it had already been taken care of. So you guys know how it goes. When someone you know passes, they usually go in sets of 3, and that's exactly what happened here. About 6 weeks after Thumper passed, Peanut Butter passed on June 6, 2016. And obviously for the Mexican Mafia, this came as a huge loss. This was one of their longtime senior members. However, Peanut Butter died of liver cancer right there in TJ as well. Again, Peanut Butter was a highly respected member that was liked by everyone. I don't think there was too many people that didn't like him, except for all the tyrants that started jockeying for position as soon as he passed. But that's another story, and it happens anytime any senior longtime member who has status either passes or is removed from his position. It elevated his position and left the West Side and the Columbia Little Cycles in a precarious position, because these 3 were not only the cohesion that were keeping everything together, but it was them that were also protecting the best interests of their street crews as well. So switching gears back to Caballo, again, I don't know this guy personally and I don't have nothing bad to say about him. I'm just the conduit that's conveying this story. So I want to be clear about the fact that I don't have no purpose for adding any extras or any extra tapatio. Anything that's said about him is coming from his own people, his own homeboys. Which brings me back to the contraband cell phones. So both of my sources said that the only reason why Caballo even became to be a factor on the streets, and the only reason why his name was even being mentioned, is because of the cell phones. Before 2015 and before he got his hands on a cell phone, he was just a name in passing. But once he hit the main line and once he got his hands on a cell phone, in their words, he was like a roving, meandering bully who was all over the place. The west side, the east side, the south side, and the north side, pushing his weight around trying to find a way to get into West Side 18th Street street operations. Why? Because he knew that's where all the money was at. But again, nobody was willing to work for him, so he just continued to keep plugging away, looking for any weak spots or a chink in 18th Street's armor. But it just wasn't there. So from what I was told, this is how it all kind of played out. So once Guado Caballo was able to get a phone and he started calling all the figureheads from 18th Street, the ones who were out there making things happen, he utilized his wife to begin pushing an agenda out there on the streets. You know, she started telling everyone that Caballo was her husband, that this is the way things needed to be done, that there was a new sheriff in town, etc., etc. And she was aggressive. She wasn't scared to speak her mind. She spoke with a sense of entitlement, like, this is the way it's gonna be or else. You know, and I'm going to try to put this in context in the most respectful way that I possibly can, because when it comes to other people's wives, and whether I like their husband or not, I won't shoot that low. I'll never start disrespecting someone else's wife, regardless of who they are or what the circumstances are. But the general feeling about his senora out there on the streets is that she's one of those types of women who assumes that she's been vested with all this street authority and all this street say based solely on the fact that she's married to a maid member. And this is something that's very common within this lifestyle. I told you guys multiple stories about some of my own experiences when dealing with women like this. The only difference is that they were married to NF members. They either just start assuming that they've been given all this power, or they get misled and it happens over the course of time. You know, I'll give you guys an example. A lot of the time, women are used as the go-betweens or as money drops to collect tax, commission, or extortion payments. So the interaction might start out cordial, but over time, let's just say someone who goes to drop off money is either late or they don't show up. You know, and this is when the women usually start to get more and more aggressive. And before you know it, they start yelling out directives and thinking that they can start barking orders. You better start getting there on time. You're not supposed to be doing this. You know who my husband is. Next time, do it like that, etc., etc. And they take up this position and they think they're entitled to talk like that because, again, who they're married to and who they're associated with. You know, and then through the course of basic observation, they come to realize that maybe their husband's a leader and that he has a little bit of authority. And for whatever reason, they believe that this translates or applies to them as well. However, that's not the way that it's supposed to be, and that's definitely not the way that it works. Hopefully you guys understand what it is I'm trying to say, but apparently that's what Caballo's girl started doing. She started acting as his mouthpiece, and in the course of relaying some of his directives, she started acting like she was vested with that same level of authority. Especially when it came to the west side. She knew that Guado Caballo didn't care for the west side, so her interaction was reflective of that same animosity. And here's something else that made that whole situation a little more awkward. I guess Caballo's wife was from Rose Hills, an opposing gang that was considered to be mortal enemies of 18th Street. So just imagine dealing with a female that's associated with your ops, who comes into your hood trying to press a hard line and who tries to dictate your politics. I mean, they respected her because she was his wife and they were playing by the rules, but he didn't want her out there because he knew she wasn't really welcome out there and that there were people laying in the cut to make it look like she was the victim of a bad accident. Anyways, I'll get back to that in a minute, but the other thing my sources said made Caballo look real ineffective out there is the fact that most of the people that he recruited to work for him weren't even from 18th Street. They were recruited from other neighborhoods, and this didn't sit well with a lot of people. Imagine a carload of dudes from another neighborhood coming into your hood with directives or orders from one of the big homies that nobody wanted to hear anything from. Put it this way, one of my sources said that there was a lot of tension and these dudes didn't even want to get out of the car. So his main understudy was an individual that went by the moniker Toro from Azusa. There was 2 guys from the south side, 2 guys from Metro, and most of the other guys that we had working for him were all relatives of his wives. And that's the other thing, he handpicked guys that were subservient and who followed him because they feared him. Not guys that were true believers, and definitely not individuals who wanted to see this thing that they had grow, but instead timid individuals who had no voices of their own. One of my sources said that these guys were funny bunnies and that when they came into the hood, you could tell that they were in a hurry to get up out of there. So anyways, I guess at one point, Caballo attempted to try to take a different approach. He sent word to the west side that he was going to try to tighten everything up for his brothers, Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco, and that he was gonna put all the money away for these guys, etc., etc. But these guys said it smelled like shit, and they seen exactly what he was trying to do. It was nothing more than another one of his futile attempts at trying to make a power grab. But again, the West Side wasn't having it, and they shut him down at every turn. You know, at one point it got so bad that he ended up having words with several dudes from the West Side that had a lot of influence on the streets. He cussed him out, said he was going to put all of them on the list, and that he was going to greenlight the whole West Side. And supposedly these guys told Caballo that he could continue trying to run his bullying tactics all he wanted, but at the end of the day, all he was a voice on the phone. And when they said that, that's when he really went on a warpath and started coming after everybody. And the West Side took this threat serious, so much so that this actually prompted several big meetings on the West Side so that they could all get together and talk about it. And yet they were all in agreement and stood in unison that they were going to stand united and that they weren't going to tolerate being bullied by anyone, including Caballo. They even agreed that if he put a green light on the whole West Side, that they'd only get it for a few months and that Coco would take it off as soon as he found out. You know, my sources said that they never wanted it to look like they were taking a personal stance against Caballo either, because they respected the fact that he was a made man. However, he was the one that made it personal. For them, it was just about following the direction that Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco set. Nothing more, nothing less. And I guess it was getting harder at that time to communicate with Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco. And because of all the new security restrictions, communication was a lot less frequent and was limited to only Xerox copies, whatever that meant. They said every time they sent a lawyer up there, it cost them 5 racks, and it was just getting a lot harder to communicate. So at the time all this was going on, not long after Thumper had been taken out, Spanky from Eastside 18th Street had the whole West Side. And because they didn't really have any Mexican Mafia members out there, Peanut Butter was considering making him and bringing him into the fold. But Caballo shot this down immediately, and it's a no-brainer why. The main reason is because it was obviously counterproductive to his agenda and what he himself was trying to do. Having another voice out there that was capable of breaking new ground and closing doors that he had opened wasn't to his benefit. And his justification for shooting down Spanky's membership was over a past incident that Caballo himself had fined him for. Supposedly Spanky was at a bar drinking one night, and according to several people that would later throw him under the bus, Spanky had a little too much to drink that night. He was described by others who were there with him as acting out and being belligerent, or conduct unbecoming. He had a little too much to drink, he got tipsy, and he broke character. Which technically is a poor excuse for stopping someone from getting made. If the standards were that high, nobody would get made. But when this incident happened with Spanky, Caballo heard about it and hit him with the ridiculous $50,000 fine. That's right, 5-0, not 5. And that's just ridiculous. You know, I've fined different members of my crew before in the past, but never have I ever fined anyone even close to $50,000. You know, but I guess Spanky was doing good enough at that time where he was able to absorb it with no issues. He took it on the chin and he paid it. Anyways, it was around this time when all the drama really started, and this is when MacArthur Park really started falling wayside. Because sometime in 2020, Joanna Lopez, the only female charged with being complicit in the Westlake fire, was released from prison and paroled back to the West Side. And she went right back to her old haunts, MacArthur Park and all up and down Alvarado Street. You know, keep in mind, she turned state evidence and followed suit behind Termite when he decided to jump ship and testify against some of his co-defendants. Like Termite, she struck a deal with the prosecutors to save her own skin and to get a time reduction. And this was no secret either. This was lambasted across the local news. Everybody knew about it, and if you were slow on getting your hood gossip, all you had to do was ask Google, and the whole story was right there. Even her best friend, or as they called each other, besties, her best friend that was supposedly pushing a hard line and who seemed to be involved in hood politics all the way up to her neck, Caballo's wife. And let's keep it real, Caballo definitely knew about it himself. There's no way he couldn't have. Because when the Westlake fire story broke and the media connected the Columbia Little Cycles gang to it, it was the biggest story in the media at that time. And if you were from 18th Street, then you definitely made it your business to know about things like this. So Joanna had the perfect trifecta going against her, and this continued to create problems for her, especially when it came to 18th Street and the Columbia Little Cycles. For one, she had a snitch jacket on her, and she not only testified against several 18th Street gang members, but she had also testified against the Mexican Mafia as well. For two of the crimes that she was found complicit for was arguably one of the biggest cases of moral turpitude in the 1990s. She was convicted for her role in a case that resulted in 7 children being burned alive and 3 women who were also pregnant as well. That was an ugly case, and it wasn't a good look to be involved in it. Obviously, anytime someone gets convicted for a crime that involves harming children, people are going to run you through the ringer. And then the other thing that made Joanna unpopular in the MacArthur Park area is the fact that she was pushing fentanyl. And like I said, this is something that Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco were adamantly against. You know, they were trying to protect the integrity of their neighborhood and prevent it from becoming another place that looked like a zombie encampment, where people were all over the sidewalks or out in the streets doing the fentanyl fold or the zombie lean. Even the cops would occasionally tell 18th Street gang members when they see them on the streets, when are you guys going to start cleaning up your neighborhood? It's starting to look like Skid Row out here. When are you guys going to clean it up and run these people out of here? So according to my sources, Joanna had been knocked out, beat up, stabbed, and humiliated by several 18th Street gang members who didn't want her in that area. But Joanna wouldn't stop coming around, even after getting beat up and knocked out several times. Every time something would happen to her, she'd run back to Kawhi's wife, complain about it, someone would get reprimanded, fined, then a little bit of time would go by, and then it would happen again. When members from Columbia Little Psychos tried asking Kawhi's wife why they were protecting a known snitch, they were told to mind their own business and to leave her alone. And they were also told that anyone who was caught putting hands on her would face serious consequences. And that the bottom line is that she's there and she's there to stay, period. You know, one of my sources said that Kawhi actually said one time that if people were going to make these types of accusations, that they needed to show paperwork. And this was laughable. They shot back that all you got to do is Google it and the whole story's right there. But there was never a response to this, which led people to believe that this was nothing more than a stall tactic and that he was consciously choosing to look the other way. And the real reason eventually showed its ugly little head. She was paying taxes. For $200 measly a week, people felt like the street code and the integrity of the West Side was being compromised. That's the other thing that some of these guys on the West Side were taking personal, is that Kawhi was from the East Side, and if he chose to do this on the East Side, then that was his business. But he was allowing undesirables to coexist on the West Side, and that was reflecting back on them. Apparently, there was also some 2-5ers that started coming around MacArthur Park too. They were all strung out on Fetty, but they knew that this is where they could come to find it. You know, when this story was being conveyed to me, the one thing that wasn't making sense to me was why Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco weren't doing anything to contain Joanna or any of the interference that was playing out on the West Side. So I asked that question, why? Why didn't they step in and do something? And both of my sources basically said the same thing. They said, you gotta understand that Puppet and Night Owl are now in their 70s. And even though it's in remission, Puppet has cancer in one of his eyes. Not only that, but his main focus right now is Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Ever since Chapo's been in ADX, he's been a work in progress. Puppet started preying on the heart and mind of this guy Chapo. They've been able to extort Chapo for $350,000. So apparently, Puppet's got bigger things on his plate. So this leaves Coco, and again, according to my sources, it's difficult to communicate with either one of them right now. It's been hit and miss, but from what I've been told, it's something that continues to be worked on. You know, I personally have no desire to see anyone get hurt, and even though that threat still continues to be a factor for her today, hopefully Joanna gets smart and takes her business somewhere else. You know, and the only reason why I decided to run this story is because everything that I've talked about in this story is already well known on the streets and amongst everyone who's also involved. You know, this is all old news and it's been playing out for months now. The Columbia Little Psychos know, 18th Street as a collective knows, people all over the West Side know, and Joanna herself knows. You know, she's obviously comfortable and she's being protected. Otherwise, I doubt she'd be out there. You know, but the other part of this story that I thought was important and that I also wanted to bring a level of awareness to is the detrimental effects of fentanyl and what it's doing to people out there on the streets. People should be terrified by this epidemic and what it's already done. You know, the crack epidemic of the 80s and 90s was devastating, and people were panicking when they were seeing how bad it was ravishing some of the ghettos and some of the poor communities across the country. But I don't think it comes anywhere even close to what fentanyl has done, and we haven't even seen the worst of it yet. These synthetic drugs are no joke. Just look at some of these other big cities across the country. Places like San Francisco, Washington, Chicago, Denver, Louisiana, New Mexico, Arizona, New York, New Orleans, San Diego, Florida, Texas, Nevada, Philadelphia, Virginia, and New Jersey, just to name a few. And no place or no walk of life is exempt from this stuff. Meanwhile, MacArthur Park has become exactly to be what Puppet, Night Owl, and Coco didn't want it to become. Zombieland. People are all up and down Alvarado and 6th Street doing the fentanyl fold. fixing out in the open on people's stairs, shitting and pissing all over the sidewalks, and sleeping wherever they can. That's all changed now, and it's become to be a thoroughfare for dope fiends, junkies, and people who are addicted to fentanyl. So who knows if it'll ever get cleaned up and be anything like it used to be before, either by the city and county of Los Angeles or by 18th Street and the Columbia Little Cycles. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. If you guys liked this episode, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like this episode, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. And again, something else that's extremely important that I'm going to continue to keep reminding you guys about is to not only hit the like, drop a comment, and share the video, but also hit the all symbol on the notification bell so that you're notified anytime I drop content on this channel. So with that being said, as always, I just want to thank those of you who continue to show your unwavering loyalty and also for just continuing to tap into this channel. In the meantime, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Keep pushing that positivity. And until the next one, this is your boy B, and I'm gone.